Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm so happy you could join us on this very cold day. We are fortunate to have Christine Westerlund be our presenter today. Christine works with a number of boards and organizations, and in her other life, her real life, she does this presentation quite often, and I know she's done a lot of personal research. It's a topic she's long been interested in, and I'm so happy that she has agreed to be a presenter for us today. She has a lot to cover. There are 30 slides, so we are just going to launch right in and get on with it, and I hope you enjoy the day. Thank you. Take it away, Christine.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Anna. I appreciate that introduction, and welcome everybody to this opportunity to learn. I'm so happy to have been asked. It's a real privilege for me to be here with you all. So we're going to spend some time this morning really kind of unpacking equity, diversity, and inclusion. As you all know, there is a lot to unpack. And we certainly will not be able to get to everything today, but really want to kind of lay the groundwork, kind of give us some context for why is it that we need to think about this? How come we have the types of reactions that we do based on who we are and whose we are? So I think it's important for us to, kind of take pause and listen into this. I will, fully admit to you that, there is always a level of trepidation for myself when doing this, and simply because I'm obviously I am white. I grew up with some privilege, and but I have also taken on this work as an opportunity to really learn and to dive into this. And I have had some great mentors over the decades that really have helped me bring some clarity. I also spent quite a bit of time when I was in school really focusing on society and oppression. So this is, again, an opportunity for me. So this is me, this is my mug. You can see me, or you can see my picture here. You can throw some darts at it if you so choose. But here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to really try to get to thinking more globally about this work that we do. How is it that we interact with the world? And to really kind of look back to help us to move forward. So I'm going to look at our forebears, try to provide some historic context. I'm going to try not to belabor that. But again, there's a lot there to unpack. And to really help us lean into the work that we need to do on ourselves, thinking about what we hold as our wisdom and how is it that we can really move towards reflection. Going to provide some definitions. Why are we talking about this? The value of equity, diversity, and inclusion, thinking about culture, and shifting and moving ahead. So as you probably are accustomed to, if there are questions or comments to make, you certainly can use the chat feature. I'm thinking that probably that will be tended to as we move forward, but I'm always open to questions and conversation and clarification from your experiences. So let's just take a pause here for just a moment and think about the state of Illinois. We know that Illinois was home to many indigenous nations, including these listed here, the Illinois, the Miami, the Winnebago, the Fox and Saukes, the Kickapoo, and the Potawatomis. Also included within Illinois Nation were the Kaskaskias, the Cahokias, the Tamaroas, Peorias, and Mechigamies. What's interesting about this, I grew up in the Illinois River Valley, in which, we were surrounded by some stories about some of the indigenous populations that had lived there. But what's interesting about my time there, I grew up, it's north of Peoria, right on the Illinois River. And my high school is named for a prominent Indian chief, an Indian leader, but yet I know nothing about him. In fact, I encountered his name just recently in a book that I'm reading about the Donner Party. which led me down this interesting path to really learn more about him. I've heard tales of him, certainly, a little bit, kind of folkloric, but not necessarily presented from a position of positivity. And so it led me back to my high school webpage to see if they had any information about it, and they did not. So this is, again, the kind of, that may sound somewhat esoteric and minor, but really the reality is that we need to really lift these stories forward and honor, their role and their place in the history of not only the state of Illinois, but in the history of this nation. So these tribal nations were stolen, not just land, but their resources with support of US leaders. That many of these individuals were forced to move to Indian reservations, as they were called, in Oklahoma by the US government. And that Illinois is currently home to more than 75,000 tribal members, more prominently in the Chicago and suburban area, but again, a fair number. So we want to think then about acknowledging these Indigenous people, because it's important that we think about our forebears, those who walked this land before we have and I'm going to say title to this land, because that's exactly what was happened. That we now live in homes, we have structures that are built originally on these lands, and we have to think about it from a perspective of what that means in our life. How is it that we can understand it? And how is it that we can lean into their stories? You'll see at the very bottom of the page, there is a website that is native-land.ca. It is a website located in Canada, but it is a great website to discover. If you pop in your address or any address, you will discover who those tribal lands belong to, those tribal nations. So this is an acknowledgement, and I have had the privilege on being a part of multiple trainings over these past 2 years, and we have to take a moment to really acknowledge and lift up these stories, this history, this opportunity to learn more. So I'm going to read this aloud. This is actually taken from the University of Illinois, Chicago. They do have Native American studies there. It is an excellent website with a lot of great resources and links, and I would encourage you to look there. But if you feel comfortable, you can say this along with me. But we recognize that Indigenous peoples are the traditional stewards of the land we now occupy, living here long before Chicago was a city and Illinois was a state, and still thriving here today. As we work, live, and play on these territories, we must ask what we can do to right the historic wrongs of colonization and state violence. And we support Indigenous communities' struggles for and sovereignty. Big word there, self-determination. That means that you own your own life. And that's sometimes the questions that we have to ask when we're considering equity, diversity, and inclusion, is that idea of self-determination to move forward. So let's talk a little bit first then about this American story to kind of give us some context for what we do. And these words may be very familiar to you. We hold these words to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those words, as you know, were penned supposedly by Thomas Jefferson, a slave owner, in the Declaration of Independence. So as a nation, we do have this present and past history of racism, discrimination, and othering, that we have so much cognitive dissonance in our foundational documents and approaches. More and more are being discovered all the time. And I think we really struggle individually and as a country to kind of come to terms with this, to try to understand it because of the complexities of this and all the different actions that were taken over time. So I have for you 3 slides, and I'm going to just jump through them pretty quickly because I thought as an exercise, and I did this, for me, in a way to kind of place my brain into how this unrolled, but also to help us kind of check in with some key points that we may have more knowledge on. So this is not intended, at the bottom you'll see this is not intended to be a comprehensive list. But when we celebrate America, we have the 4th of July, we wave our flags. But let's think back to all of this that was happening before we got to that point, and then what has happened after we got to that point. So we see colonialism in the Americas, and then we know 1619, that great series that the New York Times did a couple of years ago that really, I think, really enlightened and highlighted many of the atrocities that happened when Dutch traders brought enslaved people from Africa to North America. So we see when the Native American reservation system began, the first sundown towns, I don't know if you've heard of them. Sundown towns are that when there can be no people of color after sunset. My town that I grew up in was a sunset town. There it is in 1776, America gains independence. And then westward expansion becomes real. It's certainly during Thomas Jefferson as president, where westward expansion was really significant. And we saw all sorts of interesting things happen then. The Trail of Tears, the Underground Railroad. Certainly, I think one of the things that still influences us today is Manifest Destiny, in which there is an idea that an angel, there's a famous painting of an angel kind of sweeping across America that really shows that we are a nation that has to move north and south and east and west, and that this is our destiny to own this land. And the other piece of this was this idea of rugged individualism. This was all part of, there was a historian, Frederick Jackson Turner, who wrote the Frontier Thesis, who really promoted this idea of go west, young man, young white man. And that as individuals, that we were in charge of that, not only manifest destiny, but of our own individual destiny. So that's a really, there's some dissonance embedded in this already. As we move forward in our history, we know about the American Civil War, the rise of the KKK, of course, the Emancipation Proclamation in 1865, and then of course, President Lincoln was assassinated. Again, kind of dipping back into other parts of this, we know that Native Americans for a long time there were forces around them that were assimilating them to be a part of white culture. And there were court cases that started to emerge, certainly after the Civil War, or after the Emancipation Proclamation. In 1909, there was a race riot here in Springfield that led to the formation of the NAACP. We don't talk much about race riots. I don't know about you, but last year, or was it 2 years ago, I guess I should say, when we heard about the Tulsa race riot, and I did not know anything about that. And was quite surprised to learn that John Hope Franklin, one of the best historians on the planet, his father was very involved in all of that. Of course, then we have the Great Migration, in which we saw families, predominantly families of color, moving north to get jobs. That's when the second wave of the Ku Klux Klan came forward. And then, of course, then we began to see involvement in World War II, internment camps here, another wave, certainly after World War II of the KKK. And then we see a lot of activity, certainly in the last 50 to 60 years, 70 years. Brown versus the Board of Education was really considered by many kind of that walk towards civil rights. We saw during the 1960s, so many exciting things happen. Voting rights, civil rights, economic opportunity. Betty Friedan, and I forgot to put the title of her book there. The assassination of Martin Luther King. Stonewall riots, really, in support, really riots were, police were trying to shut down the Stonewall that was in New York City, and there was a riot in which many individuals were killed.
Okay.
So looking forward, equal rights, don't ask, don't tell, Matthew Shepard's murder, what happened at the World Trade Center in 2001 that changed the way that we looked at other people of color. Immigration and border issues, same-sex marriage being recognized by the US Supreme Court, and 2 pandemics that have kind of revealed to us, we thought that we had quite a bit of equality starting to emerge, but then we learned not as much as we had thought. So that's a very quick overview. I apologize. There could be a lot of conversation. We could probably spend the rest of the year just discussing all of that. But here we are centuries later, and the struggle continues. And what we should be focusing on is our commonalities. What is it that we, what is it that we hold? And that 99.9% actually, we are genetically alike. And Mark Van Doren, some of you may be familiar with him. He is originally from Danville, Illinois, and went on to be a poet and professor. I think he was at Columbia University, if I recall correctly. But he stated this, that there are 2 statements about human beings that are true, that all human beings are alike and that all are different. And on those 2 facts, all human wisdom is founded. So genetically, we're alike. It's just outwardly that there appears to be differences. And that's really when we understand that, and my good friend and mentor, Lorena Johnson, always reminds me that race is a construct. We were taught to see color. So we spend more energy on our differences that we truly do struggle to understand and accept. We question the value of other perspectives. This is this bootstrap approach to thinking. What was it Dr. Martin Luther King said? What happens if you don't have any bootstraps? And I'm paraphrasing. We look for others to agree with. Social media has really exploded that notion. We are swayed by multiple influences, some real and some false. We seek comfort in the familiar. I think that's a coda for all of us. I want to get back to what I'm used to. I want to get back into my routine. We also want to be understood. We crave acceptance and belonging, and we want peace of mind. And there's so much more to this list. But these, I think, are the highlights. When we're expending energy, this is kind of where we hit all of our buttons here. And if you want to add more to that list, I would encourage you to pop it into chat, because there might be some things that you really want to share. Okay. So as we do this work, one of the, I think, most important things that we can do is to really do some self-reflection. And I know as a human, as a woman, a white woman, I have had to teach myself how to do some self-reflection. I get too caught up in the busyness of life some days, and I begin missing things, and I begin giving short attention to things that really matter. And so it's really an opportunity when you self-reflect to take a break or a pause, to look back and evaluate what has been accomplished, to not only celebrate victories, but learn from those mistakes, and to lean into the future direction, because that's really how we all move forward together. So we use this idea of windows and mirrors to help us to see and to understand and to think. Windows and mirrors that allow us not only to see ourselves, using a mirror, but thinking about the window that we gaze out of, to see what's out there, to see what is common, but also what is different. And the window that you look out of could be not just your window, an actual window, but the window that you use to see the world and to navigate the world. And what is it that you're willing to see, and what is it that you're not seeing? to just take a pause whenever there's something that happens that you don't know quite what to think of it or how to understand it. It's that windows and mirrors moment that you need to take on. And again, this is an opportunity to truly dive in to what did I know? What did I learn about that? What did I know about that? And I'll go back to my story about Chief Senachwine. When I read his name in this book about the Donner Party that I'm reading, I had to immediately do the windows and mirrors exercise. I had to look at myself first and think, what did I not, why did I not know this whole story? About this man who was a leader for a significant number of people for a significant period of time. And why was this never discussed? Why did this not come up in conversation? Certainly I had heard his name over the years. Obviously I went to that high school with his name on it. There are creeks and townships in central Illinois that are named after Chief Senachwine, but yet I knew nothing about him. So I had to spend some time not only looking at myself, but also looking out the window to see what I could learn. And I've learned so much about him just in the past couple of weeks. It's astonishing to me. And I have almost no one to ask why didn't we discuss this? Why didn't we talk about this? This is a pretty wonderful story. So we want to think about our perspectives and how we are shaped whenever we're thinking about equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's obviously our families, right? That's always at the top of the list. But there's traditions and culture and history embedded in that. Our experiences, our perspectives, other perspectives. We have opinions and we read other people's opinions. We have all electronic and print books, magazines, newspapers, daily briefings, TV and streaming channels. I mean, there's so much being unpacked and stories being told these days. It's astonishing. We have film, we have social media, and we have podcasts. And we take all of this information, and this is where libraries are so important because you are kind of that vessel that creates access to much of this. And we have this opportunity to really learn and grow if we're willing to do it. So I want us to just pause for just a moment here to reflect and to think about what is your story? What influences you? And is there any change that's needed? And I think the answer to that is, at least for me, is absolutely. I need to change. I need to work on myself. I need to learn more and to think about this from multiple perspectives if I can, to talk to people, to ask important questions. So just we'll sit here for just a moment for some self-reflection. All right, so let's talk about equity. So I chose images to kind of help us understand what equity, diversity, and inclusion is, but there always has to be words. But we see here, and many of you have seen this image before. So the reality is, and here we see people attempting to watch a ball game. There, ball game's going on. There's a fence there, so you can't see it. It's blocking these individuals' view. And the reality is often what we see, right? In which the tallest person gets all the boxes, right? Even though they could probably easily see over the fence. And the individual who is the smallest gets only one box to stand on, and they don't even have the capacity to get on that box. That is the reality that we often see. If we think about equality, here we see everybody has the same size box. which is helpful, but not for everyone. Then if we see equity, we see that everybody has the chance of kind of an adaptive practice to look over the fence. So we may think, well, hey, we can stop there. We have equity, which there is. But one of the ways to even take it to that next step is to remove the fence, to remove the barrier, which allows for liberation. And I think this message is just this visual is so evocative of what we see happening all the time. I remember back in the early 80s, in which there was finally the American with Disabilities Act was enacted, and the transformation of campuses, of businesses, in which there had to be some adaptive practices taking place so people who have disabilities can access these spaces and places. Before then, that wasn't even just, considered. And I find it remarkable that it took that long, until the 1980s, to make that all happen. And I still see places occasionally that do not have access, which is surprising to me. I have a good friend who is an advocate for individuals with disabilities, and she is always telling me stories from the field of places, businesses that simply are unwilling to make access available to everyone. And why is that? So this is diversity, thinking about diversity. And this is a definition that should be very familiar to you, that it is the dimensions of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, age, physical abilities, religious beliefs, or other ideologies. To me, I call this list a yes and, because we have the privilege of living in a world in which the diversity is very rich with opportunities to learn. And then what is inclusion? What is inclusion? It's belonging, that you're a part of it, that you're respected and valued, and you're seen as an individual, that the future is shaped by all. That's powerful and sometimes difficult to reach it. So the goal is to try to bring all of this together, to bring together the ideas, the diversity of people and perspectives, to really bake in equity in our policies, our practices, and our positions, and to include. And we do that through power, we use voice, and we also think about organizational culture, because that's a big deal, is organizational culture. Many of us may have worked in places and spaces that may not necessarily have an organizational culture that is welcoming to all. It may be very male-centric. I certainly worked for a couple of organizations in which it was, the males were all in charge, and the women had to make coffee. That seemed to be that's been many years ago, by the way. But, I remember being surprised by it. So one of the things that we need to do when we're doing our self-reflection using our windows and mirrors is that we need to lean into what Yoda, he didn't say this, but I think he may have said it, but it's been said by multiple people over the years. And I think it's a riff on something that I think Socrates said, that you must unlearn what you have learned. And it was my other mentor in this work, Leroy Jordan. He was a professor at the University of Illinois, Springfield, and just really helped me see the world through different eyes. But this was what he would tell every class that I co-taught with him, is that you must unlearn everything that you have learned. And that's a process. So give that kind of a part of your self-reflective practice, if you choose to do it, is what are some of the things that I have learned over the years? What are some of the things that I need to let go of, or to relearn, or just to drop it? So the question always is where do we get started at? Because, there's so much here to unpack. So to think about where is it that we go? Well, let's first think about culture. And here we are again, back kind of looking out the window. That culture is everywhere. There's a culture within your library. There's a culture within your organization. There's a culture within your family. And how is it that we need to really tend to that culture, to think about that culture, and what are the outcomes of that culture? How has it shaped our perspectives? How is it that we use that culture to make our decisions? So what is culture? Well, we know this, it's a construct, right? Consisting of complex layers of influences, both tangible and intangible. You know, you have culture, you have a what, you know, what you do, how you interact with the world is a part of the culture of you, the culture of your family, the culture of your upbringing, the culture of your community. And it's through these layers of influences that human personality is filtered and our identity is formed. And as humans, we imprint culture onto everything we do, say, make, think, feel, and value. Thinking about the culture, again, of where you're at any given time, sometimes it is a part of that window and mirrors process. And many of you have probably seen an iceberg used to illustrate some of these concepts. And so here is the iceberg of culture. Thinking about what is it that we can see that holds above the water, right? So whenever we're in groups or we're with others, sometimes this is how we process and think, is that we see what, you know, dress, art, holidays, language, architecture, literature, laws, food, etiquette, and heroes. But what lives below the water? What's there sitting beneath the water that we see and note, and it doesn't emerge because again, we're taking in just the visual above the water, but there lives the values, the traditions, beliefs, and philosophies, ethics, customs, morals, and the meaning of life. And we can say that within cultures, all of this is very different from one another. So having that willingness to lean in, to learn more about other cultures. How is it that we can have that opportunity to build relationship, to have conversations that help us learn and help those who we're having the conversations with, hopefully they have a willingness to learn as well. So let's use another lens because we still have, again, this is, you know, our windows and mirrors, and we have so much to unpack in this. This is just getting us started. So here is a cartoon, and I'm using that word very, very loosely, but there is this idea of the young man here who is identified as a straight, able-bodied, cis, rich, white man. And he's telling these other individuals, why are you people complaining? Can't you see I have a burden too? What they're carrying on their backs versus his backpack is very different from one another. And we may want to call this something that I think sometimes makes people nervous, is calling this out as white privilege. And some of you may be familiar with the work of Peggy McIntosh back in the 80s. She really defined for us what white privilege is. And she used it as a way of illustrating that for all of us, is that she called it the invisible knapsack or backpack, as it has been somewhat modernized today. But it's been amazing. Her work really, I think, opened up the eyes of many educators. Certainly, it has assisted the conversations when we think about white privilege, and to understand that white privilege being defined as an unearned advantage based on race can be observed both systemically and individually. And in that invisible backpack that we carry around, particularly if we are white, that means that we have, as she described it, we have all of those documents that allow us to move in and out of spaces and places without being questioned, without saying, why are you here? We have that capacity and entry to do almost anything that we want, that we can drive our cars freely without the risk of being pulled over, that we are able to move about, whether we are at a mall or a store or other places of commerce, without being questioned or looked at suspiciously. That's what white privilege gives us in that invisible backpack. And other things that we see sometimes in that backpack: race, ethnicity, appearance, gender, age, physical abilities, socioeconomic status, religion, sexual orientation, language, and learning abilities and styles. If you are white, then you are freely moving. Now, there are exceptions. I'm sure many of you are thinking about that right now. There are exceptions to this. But I think this is one of the best illustrations to help us understand what white privilege is. Another thing that we need to really spend time on is exploring bias, implicit bias. And that's something that we all hold. Whether it is, how our view of the world is, how is it that we need to understand that our implicit bias guides us unknowingly. We walk around with this bias and we don't, it's not like we pull it out or we talk about it because it's hidden. It's because it's been influenced and learned over what we have witnessed, what we have witnessed, not just within our families, but within our institutions, whether it is school or healthcare, but there is implicit bias embedded. One thing that certainly I've been working on with the network that I work with is that we've been looking at policies, procedures, and bylaws to see if there is bias embedded in that. A lot of individuals have brought forward the idea of our dress code still relevant. We've seen some interesting stories emerge over the past couple of years in which schools are starting to even change how is it that they allow students what they can and cannot wear to school. So one thing to consider is there is a link here, you'll see it, that Harvard has a Project Implicit that is an online test that you can take it. You have to register for it, of course, with your email. You can take these exams in which that you're looking at images and you're reacting to images. And there are about 15 of these tests. So it's looking at all sorts of it's looking at race, it's looking at sexuality, it's looking at disabilities, it's looking at just about anything that you can imagine where bias can be embedded. And so I would encourage you, if you have not done this already, to take this test. And I will tell you, you might be surprised of what you learn about yourself. But also this is an opportunity that once you've taken this test to really take that pause. That's so important in the work that we do, that we pay attention, that you have to acknowledge your assumptions. And that's tough sometimes, to acknowledge your assumptions. And we make them all the time, constantly assuming. That you understand your perspective. How did I get here? How did I get to this space? that you seek different perspectives. I think that is key. If you have the capacity and willingness to do that, is to listen to others. Because we're not right all the time. And that's a fact, and you all know that. And then finally, you examine your options and make a decision. And if you're going to find a place to start, this is where I would start first, is taking implicit bias exam. It's easy to find, even if you pop that into Google, it will come up and take it. Again, I have not taken all of them, but I have taken most of them. And it has been a good learning process. And I encourage you to do that. It's a great way to kind of start this work that needs to be done for all of us. And this work, by the way, is ongoing. It isn't a one and done. It is continuous. Another piece of this is that willingness to talk to one another and to listen, to have some deep listening skills, to have that exchange of information with one another. And I always like to pause and ask, do you consider yourself a good listener? What do you think? Just take that moment. I see some heads nodding here. That's good. And I will say that it's my experience that librarians overall are probably the best listeners on the planet. But we have to listen, not just to respond, but we listen to understand. We listen to gain knowledge, to seek insight, that we really should pause and we stop that internal conversation that we are always having with ourselves, or we're crafting that next question we want to ask. And sometimes we do something that honestly I am guilty of all the time, is that you interrupt in the middle of something that's being shared with you. So to begin this work, to think through this work, to understand or to polish your practices, another good place to start is that building your capacity to listen to one another and to gain and share knowledge with each other. That's a key piece of moving forward and thinking about equity, diversity, and inclusion. And it's a W.E.B. Du Bois really made this observation, and I think this is just some of the most important work that we can think about. That either the United States will destroy ignorance or ignorance will destroy the United States. And sometimes I think that we're moving in the right direction and then something happens. And then I'm like, oh. Now I try to be very positive about this, and I think we are moving in good directions, but we have a lot of work to do. And it's going to take all of us to do that. And I'm going to say this is not a challenge by any means, but I also want to suggest to you that libraries hold the idea is that you can destroy ignorance. That's what you do. That's the business you're in. Your mission statements may not say that, and they probably shouldn't, but this is an important place for it, is that libraries are a key player in this work. So the goal is to really take this march towards cultural competency. And again, I mentioned her earlier, Lorena Johnson, my mentor. She's retired from the University of Illinois Springfield as well. She always would insist that really, when we're talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion, we need to become culturally competent. And I think that's a key piece as well. That culture plays such a big role in who we are and whose we are. And by doing this, by understanding culture, having that willingness to dive into culture and to think about it, then we understand each other from a deeper perspective. Again, windows and mirrors. So this is a fun cartoon. This was taken directly from some of Lorena's work. She had found this, and this cartoon you'll see here that Roy inadvertently Roy dooms the entire Earth to annihilation when, in an attempt to be friendly, he shakes their leader by the head and shakes vigorously. Well, you'll see the head is a hand. So, the culture of handshaking, which is very prevalent in many cultures, does not work, for these individuals who have decided to fly in and visit wherever. So talk talk a little bit about what cultural incompetency is. Because I think, at least from my perspective, I always want to look at both sides. So what exactly, I say you need to be culturally competent, but what is incompetency? That you have those inadequate frameworks to understanding and building relationships across cultural bias, or across, cultural differences. That means that their opportunities are not being taken to try to learn, to try to understand, to take the time needed. And I think that's a key element of this, to take the time needed to really try to understand and free yourself of some of your thinking. That's where implicit bias comes in. That sometimes we just can't get past it because we're biased because of that. Or it could be, as noted by W.E. Du Bois, it could be just willful ignorance. And that's also known as explicit bias, that our bias is on display. And, we're wearing that on the sleeve. I think back to the Ku Klux Klan. And, that was something that they chose, is that their willful ignorance was on full display by wearing what they wore, because they wanted it to create fear, certainly. And we know that the KKK still exists today. And cultural incompetency can lead to misunderstandings, fear, and potentially hate. And much of the outgrowth of what we see today is very much grounded in fear and hate. Again, this is this opportunity for using our windows and mirrors to really consider culture, to examine privilege, to understand implicit and explicit bias, and to pause and reflect. So, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. We have a few minutes left, or comments that you would like to share.
I love the fact that I think your point about needing to do a constant reassessment and looking at things differently is a key reminder to all of us. Sometimes I think like, oh yeah, I've got this, I won't make that mistake again. And then I go on to make a different mistake. So it's kind of, it's like, it's really tough work. And I think so much of it is built in. You and I talked about how we both grew up in communities that were sundown communities, and I had no idea until years and years later. I think actually one of the towns you pointed out to me in one of our previous discussions, and I had no idea. No.
Right, and there's a great resource if you are interested in learning. If you were a sundown town, it's at the U of I, and it's really easy to find on the internet. I can't think of the link at this moment, but there is a database of communities that are, and usually a little story attached to why it's a sundown town at the University of Illinois. So I would encourage you to take a look at it. I think it's an interesting place to maybe even start to understand. There's, I know Anna is always, whenever we talk about sundown towns in Illinois, Anna is always brought up, and I think they have made some strides over the years, certainly, but that is something to really consider. And I remember part of that conversation too, Anna, that, you and I both talked, we have in our families, we have individuals of color. Certainly I'm privileged to have LGBTQ in my family as well. And that has been learning opportunities for all of us in working on, acceptance and removing our bias. So, this is work. Family dynamics have changed dramatically, and I think that's for the best. And it brings so much richness to our lives. And how is it that we can learn and grow from that?
Well, I think, this is one thing. I think you're absolutely right. We do need to learn and grow. And I think one of the things I find having a very diverse family is that, I find myself worrying and about people and, thinking, oh, their life is going to be harder because of this. And I always kind of challenge myself to say, well, yes, it may be harder in some ways, but it may be better in other ways because they can truly be themselves now. So, I don't know. It's a tricky thing, and it's something, we all kind of struggle with, I think.
Right. And that's where I think the solution of that's why windows and mirrors become so important for that moment of self-reflection, to really just stop and say, all right, let's kind of rethink this, or let's find a way that allows us to understand and look forward rather than consistently looking back.
Let's see what we've got here on the chat. Yes, Amy says these are really hard topics. We had a community conversation a few months ago on a documentary that focused on race and transportation in America. We had a positive reaction from members of the community, but it was still hard to discuss our shared history, to learn that we really weren't taught all of the racial history of our country. Boy, that's very true. And Susan said, this is very eye-opening. You gave us actionable items for us to input into our everyday lives. Thank you.
You're welcome. It is a process. And when I say windows and mirrors, I practice that every day. I have to. I'll confront something or learn something that I'm like, how is that even possible that that's happening? So to learn as much as you can. And I will say, I'm very privileged to work in a very culturally diverse network in which I have learned so much from over the years and continue to learn. And what it has taught me is that I have to, again, take pause and listen. That's the first action that I have to take. And one thing that we'll talk about in our second session is that we will also talk about the value of belonging. And I certainly hold to the principle that public libraries are, I think, the champions of belonging in community. And how is it that we can structure our work around belonging?
Well, I think it was very brave of your library to have that documentary film and to open it up to the community and have the potential for community discussion around some very hard topics. I'm sure that some of the people watching and listening today are, trying to figure out how to do similar things in their communities.
Right.
So how do you set the ground rules? How do you, when you interact with people, how do you make sure everyone feels safe and that, do you set guidelines? How do you handle a situation like that? I'm sure in your work too, you're dealing with people from very many different backgrounds, and I'm sure there might be tensions around such emotionally charged issues.
Well, I think the best way to do that is, again, giving space and place to allow people to speak their truth, to, again, encourage everyone to listen. And that's sometimes difficult because, again, we want to interact. We are kind of wired to do that. But, creating the invitation, I think, is the key piece. And yeah, and I was able to participate in that session at the library. And there had been a session at the high school too, where high school students had also at the high school here in Chatham were able to watch that film as well, and then have a moderated conversation. And I think that was kind of the key piece to that, was having a set of questions in an environment. We were in a space in the library in which we felt very comfortable in. Nobody else was listening in other than the gathered group, in which we had a very good conversation, a very, I think, open conversation about, things that we had not been exposed to, and how is it that we can really get to that place and space where we can get, and I don't want to mischaracterize what anybody said, but I think at the end of the session, I think we all walked out of there with this deep sense that we had work to do, that we witnessed this, we heard about these stories, and we need to tell others about what our experiences are. And I think giving that charge was probably, for me, was one of the most important takeaways that I've had from any session. That I felt that real pull that more needs to be said.
I have, I'm not sure how I would handle it in a library setting or a public setting. On a personal setting, I think it may be interesting, or I think it's easier to handle if someone is truly trying to grapple with this topic and they're truly trying to understand. And, if you're having a conversation with that person and they bring up a belief or a concept or something they have done or something they've said that, may make you bristle, because it's like, but it's like, it's part of their working through things and processing. How do you handle that situation? Do you like the cancel thing? It's like, that's inappropriate, and that's, it's like, or do you say, okay, I understand where you're coming from, but think of the other person, or, how do you handle it?
Well, my favorite, I've done this for years, because those instances have happened over and over again. I always stop and be silent for, a couple of seconds. And then I'll say, tell me more about that. But you can also lay a ground rule, say, tell me more about that, but let's make sure that we're civil.
Okay.
And that tends to, it's amazing to me how well that works. Because number one, it's an invitation that they haven't, their ideas have not been shot down. We haven't said to them, wow, that's, we didn't react that way. And typically what will happen, and I did not originate this. I worked several years ago with a large group in Illinois to resolve issues within the child and family welfare network. And so we would have these big gatherings in which there was opportunities for major contention, let me just say that. And one of the thought leaders that led that said, one way to always try to get to the heart of a situation that you need to talk about is to pause and say, tell me more. And typically what will happen is that you'll hear more of their side, because what you maybe what has been said is not necessarily reflective of their beliefs, and you can find common ground. And I believe that, I truly believe that with most, that we can find some commonalities that really will help us move forward together.
I find it interesting is that often on a one-to-one level, people who come from a different ethnic group or a different sexual persuasion or whatever, and people know them on an individual basis, they will like them and they can be quite cordial and pleasant to that person. But then when, they'll make comments about the group as a whole, they're negative. And it's kind of like, this person and they're, yeah, I'm always kind of confused by that too. And, again, I guess it's a time where I can say, tell me more about that.
Right. I think at the heart of this, as human beings, is, and I'm going to go back to what I said, kind of say a little bit more about that, is as human beings, we really want to belong to one another. We want to belong in community. And what we have, the divisions that we have created, seen and unseen, have pulled us apart. Mm-hmm. And there's a thought leader about this, John A. Powell. He's with the Othering and Belonging Institute. It's at University of California, Berkeley. And he has spent quite a bit of time unpacking for us what is othering, and how is it that we can build belonging even with those that we disagree with, or those that we feel that we have a contentious relationship with. Because we all, again, as humans, we have that deep embedded desire to belong. We may not sense that or know that, but that's why those like what your example that you shared is, I think, a good example of that. You say one thing or do one thing, and then you act differently with another group or with a subset of that group.
Yeah. Interesting behavior. And, I think you're right in that we are all human.
Right. And what that means that we're fallible. And that also means, we have to acknowledge that, that we have flaws. And I think the quicker that we get to seeing them and perhaps living them, then, it's not that our lives will be any easier, but I think that we'll be more comfortable.
Amanda texted, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance in that. Not you, Steve, you're one of the good ones that's difficult to push through. And yeah, I've encountered people who have said that about other people, or right. And it is hard to push through that. And it is hard when you're with a group of people and they may say, you may be with a group of people who are supporting that kind of thinking. And it's kind of hard, you have to make a decision. Do I sit here and let them say things like that? Or do I step up and say, well, have you ever thought about it this way? Or, again, how do you handle those situations, Christine?
Well, what a great question. And I don't know if I have a good answer. I certainly, when I hear that, I'll I always have to say, that's interesting. How do you know that he's a, that Steve is a good one? And, and I may not ask that, but I may ask a question that's somewhat related to that. I'm like, oh, Steve. Yeah. It's like, so I said, that's, Steve's a good guy. But, I don't want to be blatant and say, so what's he done? But what I want to say, what I want to do is I want to ask a probing question, say, oh, really? What, tell me a little, again, tell me a little bit more about that. I guess I didn't know that Steve had that level of greatness in him. And not to make it funny, but I think asking a question, an open-ended question, is the right way to always do it. Again, tell me more is certainly an open-ended question. But yeah, trying to, I think, use it as a way to advance inquiry rather than just say, oh, Steve's a good guy and I'm not. Great. Which is how most of us would interpret that, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and yeah, I know personally, this was a very hard decision for me. I was raised to respect my elders at all times. And I was having a conversation with my 83-year-old aunt, and she was, promoting a view of Hispanic people that I had trouble with. And, I have several friends who've seen me through hard times, and I'm just in awe of them on so many levels, who are Hispanic, and I couldn't let her get by with it. So I did speak up and I did say something to her, and then I was like, oh, did I do the right thing or not? And I was like, I was always, and she died, about a year ago. And I was always like, from the time I said something to her until the time she passed away, I was always like, did I do the right thing? Was I wrong for doing that? And, and I talked to my cousin about it later, and she said, oh no, didn't faze her at all. But it's like,
And I firmly believe that if it's said, with love, that, most things can be accepted. It's not universally true, but, your intention was absolutely, spot on, and and sometimes you do have to speak your truth. And sometimes we are very reticent at times to do that. But I also believe that you can't speak your truth without offending others. That's quite possible, but you have to kind of pick the space and place to get that done.
Thank you for that. That's illuminating for me. Thank you so much for saying that. Do other people have comments or questions or observations or things that Christine might help you navigate your way through? Well, please chat or unmute yourselves, and you can, join the conversation.
And I will say this is a practice. You can't just say, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm going to go out there and, be a part of this world and take it all in and try to, spread this around. That it is a daily practice. You have to work on yourself.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. I took a day-long training course that the wonderful Amy Byers turned library directors on to. It was offered through a group in Springfield. And it was wonderful. It was about, I forget the exact title, but it was like something about, overcoming discrimination. And
right.
Again, it's like, you can't ever stop working on yourself, and you have to be prepared to be an ally and a friend to people of, you know, it's like, you know, just offer compassion and support where and when it's needed. And sometimes that's an act of courage. You know, it shouldn't be, but it sometimes is.
Yeah, that's the Crossroads anti-racism training that you're referring to. And I think that there are still opportunities to access that. I think I just received a notification about that. Yeah, our entire staff did that where I work, went through that training together at my recommendation. And I think that it really has evolved into some really good conversations for us, you know, that we use it kind of as a touch point to, you know, and again, I'm very, very, you know, privileged to work in a network of all, you know, I always say of everybody's here, which is very exciting for me. But I also will say that sometimes the best course of action, particularly if you are white like me, is to stay silent. You know, because that sometimes, you know, if you have nothing to add, you know, particularly from your experiences and your perspectives, then I think the best course of action is to be quiet when needed.
Again, another profound thing. It's hard for me to be quiet, so that is a good reminder.
Yeah.
Sometimes just keep your mouth shut. This is, you know.
Well, that's exactly it. Yeah, because I'll kind of, if I'm in a conversation or part of a conversation in which it's kind of going somewhere that I'm uncertain of, you know, I have to remind myself, okay, you're just listen. This is your opportunity to listen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can always ask a clarifying question. Again, you know, say, or, you know, if you just say, tell me more or say more about that. You may, if you come to lots of my trainings, I tend to say more about that. I want to know more. But I think it's important that you're, you know, when you're in a conversation, you're tending to that conversation, right? You just don't walk away. You're listening. You know, you're perhaps nodding your head at times, and that's not an affirmation nod. That usually means that you're tuned in to what's being shared. And I think that's a key. You know, I mentioned listening a couple of times. I'm going to go back to it now. The one thing that we have stopped doing, I think, at least this is what I have witnessed over the last couple of decades, is that we really do not listen to learn and reflect. We listen, again, to respond. And by training ourselves to really sit and listen and then to sit with what's been shared is a real art. And I would encourage all of us, and it is a struggle all the time for me, you know, because it has to become a practice that I am willing to take on every day. And I'm not sure if I have yet been successful at that. So it's really polishing that capacity to listen and to be comfortable with silence.
Yeah, that's that's very tough. And for some of us, that's even tougher. But yes. Well, does anyone have any other comments? Carol Brockmeyer from Doherty has an awful scenario that happened Monday at her library. Let's see if I can scroll or see anything more. Carol, do you want to type some more about this, or you can unmute yourself, I think, maybe, I hope. If not, if you could just text us the situation. We'll try to unmute you. John, if you're there, can you unmute Carol Brockmeyer, or you can unmute everyone, basically. So anyone who would like to, I don't have that.
I'm looking for Carol.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is awful. And I mean, it is just awful. I don't even know where to start. And I got to the meeting late, so I'm hoping I'm on point here. I've had this patron from another community, and he refuses to go in his own library. So I've been dealing with him since July of 2020 when we reopened after 4 months. And he is probably a man, doesn't matter his age, probably early 70s. Anyway, he makes a lot of rude comments. He comes in every day at 9:30. He's here for 2 hours using the computer. He has constantly said rude, obnoxious things to my staff. He thinks he's funny, okay? I put up with it. I don't know why, but it's a public library, so he has the right to be here and everything. So Monday he came, and he's here every day, I kid you not. It's like clockwork. He came in on Monday, and we're open. I think that's going to be changing in the next year, but we've never been closed on Martin Luther King Day. And he came in, and I said, Robert, how come, I shouldn't have said his name. I said, what are you doing here today? You should, be home celebrating, MLK Day and thinking. And he goes, oh, I'm celebrating his death. And I go, I can't, my mouth hit the floor. I said, I cannot believe that you just said that. He goes, well, it's the truth. And I have to bite my tongue so much with him. And on my board, I have talked to them the last 18 months because it's like daily. He's wearing, he says rude. He says things like, when this becomes a real library, he says, because of course we're slow. And it's his personality or whatever in his background. I understand that. Anyway, he came, the last 2 days, I kind of stayed in my office when he came in and kind of avoided him. Well, today I was out front because we're short-staffed, and he tried to engage me in conversation because I decided on Monday, you know what, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to engage conversation with him. I'm just going to let him go about his business and stay away for my own good and for his own good. So he came in and he tried to engage me in conversation today, and I said, Robert, and I probably handled the whole thing wrong. I know I did, but I had it. I said, I thought about this, and I go, I think it's best if you and I don't have a conversation anymore. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, because every time we talk, I go, I get really offended. He goes, well, how do I offend you? And I said, well, example, the other day when you said that about Martin Luther King. I said, I was really offended about that. He goes, why would you be offended? And it's like, I'm just pulling my hair out. And I've said, I go, you say rude and obnoxious things. And I said, I don't want to engage in conversation. I'm choosing not to talk to you anymore. You can come in and use the computer, whatever. So he went about his business over on the computer, and I was going past him to do something, and he stopped me, and he did try to apologize. And I said, well, Robert, you just need to stop and think before you talk. And anyway, and I said, he goes, I'm just going to leave. And I go, okay. And he said, but I'm contacting your board. And he goes, your days here are over. He threatened my job. He threatens to go to my board. I go, Robert, I've been talking to you with my board for the last year. I go, you just need to stop and think before you talk. I know I didn't handle the situation right, but how do you handle someone that's continually on a daily basis says rude and obnoxious and racist things? How do you I tried talking to him about these things in the past, and then I was going to remove myself, but I should have just removed myself and not engaged. How would you have handled this? How do you can't change people. He believes that way. I can't change him.
Right.
but how do you approach people that can, you know, it's wearing. And I think this last couple years, we've all are worn down. I don't know how would you have handled this?
Well, first, I'm sorry that this is happening to you, because I can tell that, yeah, it's a very difficult situation for you.
I'm not worried about my job, so I'm just.
Yeah, right. Well, you know, the fact that he is not a resident of your district, you know, certainly, you know, he can certainly notify your board, but, you know, he's
calling his attorney.
Yeah, and that's fine. First of all, do you have any sort of policy about if library customers become obnoxious or unruly? Do you have any sort of policy in place about that?
We do. Yeah.
Okay.
I just put it off for so long, and I every month I've talked to, you know, with my board about him, and they know the situation. Yeah, I did say, you know, the mask, I have argued with him for the last 18 months about the mask and wearing it properly. Well, he doesn't. It's just continual. He should have been kicked out a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I think, you know, he's, you know, yeah. And I think the question is, you know, how do you handle this? You know, if you could, number one, you know, he's kind of taking up your time. He's also probably disturbing other users of the library while he's there, I would guess. And there could be, you know, a reason why he comes to the library every day. You know, that is where.
I told myself that.
Yeah.
This is the only thing he's got going for him.
Right. And that's exactly right. And, you know, so, you know, you could do a couple of things, but I think it's up to you. You could certainly say, listen, you know, this is a public library for everybody, you know, so we can't have, you know, these open conversations, you know, because we respect everyone here. But, you know, the other thing is that he's taking up a lot of your time. And, you know, not only physical time, but also your mental time. And
he did accuse me of everything's political with me, and I don't have a sense of humor.
Yeah, well, boy.
Yeah.
But, you know, does it rise to the level of that you feel as if that he is harassing or
yes.
creating a nuisance?
Yes.
That might be what, you know, that's maybe where you would hang your hat to say, listen, you know, we have these, you know, this policy in place, you know, we ask that you come and respectfully, you know, treat, you know, the staff, and also that you conduct yourself without any sort of threatening behavior. Yeah. You can do that, you know, certainly warn him of that or tell him that, and perhaps that you give him a chance to change. And if he doesn't, you know, because yeah, he comes to your library because probably something happened at his other library, right?
I might have mentioned that to him.
Yeah. So, you know, that's the advice that I have, but I'm sure there are other folks on here that have far better wisdom to share.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate that question. That is something that can be very troubling.
We do have some chat here. Diana from Carbondale says, I think you did handle the situation correctly. Two phrases that come to my mind is, that's not okay, and it's not okay for you to verbally abuse our staff. I think those are good points. And Ashley from Caseyville says, librarians are here to provide resources and assist patrons with their needs, but we are not required to entertain them. Time limits within the library is just as important for staff mental health as well as their physical safety. Usually there is a reason why. He is no longer patronizing his own library. That's a good point, Ashley. It is also within your legal means to not tolerate harassment. And Shandy said, at that point, he's just trying to hurt you. Easier said than done, I know, but I hope you can see that what he says about you isn't true. Good point too. Any follow-up remarks, Christine, on anything?
I just wonder too, if perhaps, and I hate to say this out loud, but you know, there's a reason why he comes to the library every day, you know, because he has found that that is a place of belonging for him. But I wonder if perhaps there is someone who could intervene on the library's behalf. You know, if, you know, and I hate to suggest this, but perhaps, you know, if he has a family member or perhaps a trusted friend that you are aware of that could maybe bring to his attention that what he is doing is really, as it's been mentioned here, that he is harassing, that might be a solution. But I don't know how successful it would be.
Yeah, that would make sense, but yeah, I'm just reading into the situation, but I assume this guy's pretty much on his own. He's probably managed to alienate a lot of people and comes to the library because it's a safe place for him to hang out. He just needs to respect and make it a safe place for everyone.
Right.
So, okay. Okay, there's some other comments here. We ban people who refuse to wear a mask properly without perpetual reminders. You might appreciate some of the wording in our patron conduct code. It's on our website at carbondalepubliclibrary.org. And and Kyla from Mississippi Valley says, it sounds like you have a fairly long and documented history of his ability to follow policies and procedures combined with harassing behavior. Sounds like it's time to take action. Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate your time. I won't keep you any longer. I look forward to part 2 in March, and I hope you're able to stay warm and content on this cold day. And thank you very much, Christine. It's been very illuminating, and we have recorded this and we will make it available for people.
Well, thank you, Anna. I really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to share this with you. You know, this is always, I think, tough conversations to have. It takes a lot of self-exploration and self-reflection, as I've noted. So thank you for allowing me to present this. And I always love having an opportunity to hang out with people who are the best folks on the planet, who are people who work at libraries. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that. That's very kind of you to say, Christine.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So, and I see you posted what we can look forward to. So I'm very excited about that. Thank you so much.
Sure. My pleasure. Thank you. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Okay. And then we can start hearing updates from the state library and our staff. So you're welcome to remain with us, Christine, or you can, you know, go on with your busy day.
I'm going to hop on another meeting right now. So thanks.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I know you're a woman with a lot of demand. So okay,
all right.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Pat?
Hi, Anna.
Yes.
How are you?
Hi. Good.
Oh, I just want to say thanks to Chris. I know she's hopping off, but obviously there's a lot of work to be done. And thanks to the community here for offering support to everybody. It shows what a great group you are. So greetings from the Secretary of State, Jesse White, and the Illinois State Library. I do have a small little presentation, just a few slides, and it really involves a map that we have contracted with Southern Illinois University and the folks there that do the geospatial mapping applications and research center. They're called GeoMark. So I'm wondering if I can share my screen. Hopefully I can do that. If I mess this up, hopefully your IT person will help me. I guess I just do share screen.
Mhm.
And I have this little thing here. And from the very beginning, as they say. Okay, like I gave a little bit of an introduction about.
This, I don't think you shared the correct window. We're not seeing it.
Oh, darn. Okay, let me see. So you don't see anything. All right. Are you seeing my laptop at all?
Actually, we're just seeing you.
Oh, okay. Well, let me go back to Zoom, share screen. Wondering if this is what I need to do. Well, select a window that you want to, which I'm doing. Well, can you see this?
There you go.
All right.
There you go.
I apologize for that. Okay, so this won't take long, I promise. So this is just a little tiny presentation about this map that we have contracted with that group in Southern Illinois University. And it is to replace the IDOR map that we had previously, the Department of Revenue map that used to reside and show different data points of different service areas, but it was based on the taxing districts. So this one is actually based on the 2020 census, and it is the certified data. And it was provided by the US Census Bureau and the Illinois Department of Revenue. So all of this is overlaid onto the library service areas. And it's pretty simple. It's not available yet, but we expect it to be open to the public very, very soon. And it's actually a website. So there it will show the library service area boundaries and the populations at the core. At some point, we may want to layer on other data points from the census, but at this point, this is kind of where it's going. And when you go to the website, I'm just doing this little, these are just static slides, but you see the state of Illinois there, and then the buttons on the side are just similar ones that you would see in any kind of GIS application. And about, there's a legend, then there are layers here, and then there's an ability to change how it looks, you know, whether the topography, whether you want to see it to look like streets or the terrain. And it's completely interactive. A user can click on any library service area, library building, or larger geographic zone, and a pop-up will appear providing specific information. There are pie charts within some of these groups. And if a user hovers their mouse over the pie chart, a tooltip will appear providing specific information. Okay. And this is just another view here. This is where we've clicked on the library buildings in the layers in Illinois and library service areas. And here you see down here, we selected West Frankfort Public Library, and it just has the address. And if you click all these dots represent library buildings and the Illinois and library service areas. And so you click on the dot and then you would get that information. And then this is the last and final little slide. But when you dig a little bit further here, you can see we've typed in Mount Carmel Public Library in the search box, and you can see in here what you would see when you're getting into the data level for each library. And here we've done a comparison between the 2010 and the 2020 census. And so there's a plus minus figure there for the population. And then the same is true for the percentage of change. And then one of the layers in here that has come with the data is the race and ethnicity population breakdowns for each community. There are many, many other breakdowns, but this was one that we just used as an example for the beginning. And one of the biggest differences between this map and the one that we had previously with the Department of Revenue is that this is constantly, it is based on the census rather than the taxing districts, and it can be easily updated. So if your library has an annexation or a special census conducted, you can provide us that documentation, and then we will be able to update the data. So, we think it's pretty easy to use. And as the website updates occur, it will constantly be updated. And we've never done one like this where we're constantly trying to keep it fresh and updated. So bear with us. Certainly the Department of Revenue map was a good start, but this has great potential with a lot of other data sets. It will evolve over time, and newly developed website tools can be added, and we're working on help documents and expect this to be available very soon. So that is all I had on that mini little presentation. And that's all I had to really offer from the State Library. Thank you.
That is great. Is this located on the library, the Illinois State Library's website with an
It will
easy-
be,
Okay.
but it is not available yet. It's not really even that we aren't turning it on. It's just not finalized. There were some
Okay.
data points that have been, they're double checking with the place that we're contracting with. So it's
Oh,
just,
that's great.
it doesn't reside anywhere right now, but we will definitely let everyone know, let the systems know. And anyway, it just should be fantastic. Certainly in previous census times when, you know, data needed to be certified, so much of it was done manually with maps and
Oh, yeah.
census blocks and things like that. So this has just been fantastic, that being able to employ the GIS technology.
Well, thank you for that preview. It is wonderful. And yes, because those are very challenging things to do by hand. So this is a big step up, but thank you. And
You're welcome.
you know, the State Library for doing that.
You're
That's
welcome.
very useful.
Thank you. Thanks for asking. Bye.
Okay. Thanks, Pat. Bye. Okay. The next we'll do is an update on share. If Cassandra is available, that would be wonderful.
Yes, thank you so much, Anna. I have a few updates. The most pressing is that we completed our annual meeting last week, and we will be getting the video for that, making that available soon. There was one item up for a discussion and for vote for the share data privacy and protection, and so that is on the share website. If anyone would like to review that in advance of the vote, which will open tomorrow. So I do have that information available for you. And so I also have some really exciting news just to give you a little bit of an update on what has been happening with the Share mobile library app. We have over 20 libraries that have decided to customize their app to their library. So that's really exciting. And so with that, since we launched in October, on October 25th, we have had 37,223 people use the app. 48,081 books have been requested since December, up until the end of December. So that's phenomenal. We're really excited about that. And so I hope you all are as well. And so one of the other pieces of information, we do have a highlights page. And so let me go ahead and post that to you, to the chat here, because this highlights page is a really great resource if you want to share for social media. It is on the mobile app. And if you have a custom page, we did not automatically include that, but you're more than welcome to use it and we can get that set up for you. And so for some reason, I am not, okay, here we go. I'm going to go ahead and post to that. So this is the highlights page. That is the reader's advisory content that we're generating. So some of our cloud library collections are most requested in Share, which is a really great reader's advisory tool for you. And so that is just an option for you to be able to share items quickly, and it's all in one location. So I did want to point that out to everyone. We had also had some challenges with the Polaris system. It wasn't Polaris that was going down, it was actually the internet in Champaign, which was knocking out our both the internet, and then we had some server issues, which was knocking out both our websites and Polaris. And so because of that, we have a new service so you can get text alerts when we have downtime. And so I'm going to go ahead and also send that out in the chat, but you can text Polaris to 84483 and you'll receive a text alert. We will make sure that we're sending information out via email through our email distribution list for Share Official Business as well. And so I also wanted to just remind everyone that we are working to make available the common loan recommendations that we've recently released. And so that program is up and running. So if you're interested in that, it's for most items, it's a 3-week checkout. There are some like DVDs, for example, that would be a 2-week checkout. And the purpose of that is to go ahead and try to standardize some of our loan periods just to make it easier for our customers. And so if you're interested in that, it is just a recommendation. It's not a requirement. And so if you're interested in doing that, or maybe interested for books, but maybe not DVDs, that's certainly fine. And so you can reach out to Dina Porter. She can get you some additional information about trying that and making those changes on the back ends. She's also asked that if you have not sent your closing dates in for 2022, to please go ahead and do so. And we also have the Share Bibliographic and Cataloging Standards Committee tomorrow at 10 a.m. And so that's an L2 if you're interested in joining us. Last but not least, we did send some information out to the Share newsletter and the IHLS newsletter regarding the CMC. There are 2 services now in the state of Illinois for foreign language cataloging. Of course, the CMC. So if you have items that are considered part of a special collection that are in a world language, you can send those for the CMC for cataloging. If you have items that are part of your normal collection that you don't consider it a special collection, but it is in a different language other than English, like a world language, there is a new cataloging service that is through the Rails group that it's offering statewide service for that. And so if you don't consider it a special collection, you can certainly send it on for that cataloging piece. So that is most of what I have for updates, but I do also have a really exciting announcement. Share is turning 10, and so we are having a birthday celebration on April 4th. That'll be a Monday at 3 p.m. And so we're having a virtual birthday party for Share. And so I really hope that you can take a moment out of we can all take a moment out of our hectic schedules to just be a little silly and have a little bit of fun to celebrate this community that we've built. And so I look forward for everybody joining us. There'll be some prizes, there'll be some treats. So I look forward to it.
Okay. There were some comments. Kyla said, please, let me emphasize, please consider participating in the common loan period. It was previously in a consortium that streamlined its checked out periods, and it was so much smoother for staff and patrons. Yes, I've been in probably the same consortium that Carla is talking about. And yes, it did make it so much easier. It's less confusing for the patrons. So yes, and then Amanda says happy birthday, Cher. And Shandy said special collection as defined by your library. So any special topic or field of study collection is for your library, would fall into the CMC cataloging
Mhm.
arena. So I'm sorry about that. Okay, thank you. Anything else you'd like to add, Cassie? Because that was quite an action-packed update there.
It was. I didn't think I had a whole lot today. And then as I actually wrote it all out, I thought, wow, this is going to be a big one. So yes, thank you so much, Anna, for letting me share those items.
Well, thank you, and happy birthday, Cher.
Yay!
Yeah, it'll be fun celebrating. So this will be great. Okay, next on tap, Susan, would you like to talk about delivery service?
Sure thing. I always like to talk about delivery. So I thought first I would share some statistics. Who doesn't love statistics? Just kidding. These are from November and December, and I thought they really reflect some positivity. In November and December, IHLS delivery and the libraries through the interlibrary loan, we did over 518,000 items. This is almost pre-COVID numbers. It's, I see it as really a positive sign. I haven't broken down, but just to know that we are doing that, you are doing that between the hubs, between each library, even libraries outside of our library system. All those numbers totaled up to over 518,000 items. That's like wonderful. The other thing is that we are still investigating the automatic material handler. They call it AMH for short. I always called it the sorting machine, but there's actually a technical term. The reason that we are investigating that is that, like you, we have limited funding, don't we? A lot of it's from 2015, same kind of levels. And what can we do proactively in our processes in delivery to make that money stretch further and give more service at the same time? Now, a lot of the items or a lot of the benefits of having an AMH is not just system level. It's not just because we start saving on personnel, we start saving on how we are packing those items. If you are a member of SHARE, where the potential can be is that you could be tracking your items. You wouldn't have to be putting labels on them. Yes, we've got to do the barcodes or the RFID. RFID, again, you put them where you want to, inside, outside, you're good. It's the barcodes that we really need to start putting on the outside. And if you start now doing that, by the time we get the AMH, who knows, you know, your whole collection that circulates, I would just focus on the collection that circulates, will be done. I'm always positive about these things. The other thing that is happening is we've got our first dog delivery on the go service, first dogs bag in to make sure that we like it. It's an orange bag. This is for that same route, same day delivery. So every library obviously is on a route. So as you look at your route, you'll see that above you are a bunch of libraries, or maybe one, or I'm so sorry for the first library, none. But I'm trying to figure something out for that slot, right? So the concept is that, and many of you are already doing dogs, many of you. So it's not really a new thing. What's new is that it's an orange bag that we put it in so that the driver immediately knows that this is a dog. I need to put it in the back of my van next to the tub that's going on down the route. But if you borrow from that library above you on the same route, conceptually with, you know, this is a partnership here. that library pulls that immediately, puts it right out for delivery. It'll be delivered to you as soon as it's pulled from, not as soon, but within that day. We are going to do our best effort to bring that item to you. This does a couple things. One, it gives amazing service for your patrons. Two, it also saves delivery time, which, you know, goes into money. So the time that it saves is that items not in a bin to go all the way back to the hub, to be sorted out, to be put back into a bin for that next day. So there will be savings there for system staff as well. Where you can find, if you go onto our website, go to delivery, and then there's a sub, you know, you click on delivery, and then it should say routes. And that's where you would find what route you are. You can also always call us. We can let you know, but there's a search bar. We've got a search bar there so that you can put your library name in. It'll pull you up on what route you're on. We're anticipating, as we start the bag thing, there will be like a little, I envision something just like a little thing that says, hey, you're on route 7 out of the Champaign hub. So that you'll be able, and then it would have the routes listed, just a little thing that we would print out. You feel free to laminate if you want. And then it's as of this moment, these are the libraries that are on there. We haven't done a major move of libraries on routes since that GeoMark that did that. Oh my gosh, that fabulous map. They used to be called LASA. So they're the ones who helped us get our routes so that we could give you guys access to 5 days a week service. We are not looking at volumes. I'm sorry, in a town of 302 people, not likely you will have 400 items a week, right? But you deserve that service. That's the point. We're trying always to touch back to equal service, to get that equality to all libraries in Illinois. I think it's really important. I think that that's just a given. You need to have the same service as if you were living, say, in Belleville. You know, just because you're smaller, you still need to have access to that. So that's coming down the road. We should have like a memo thing going out, and maybe some, I don't know, some route things printed out for you guys, but you can find it. And thank you, Shandy, for copying and posting. I'm not a technophobe or anything. I'm always jumping in, but that would have probably taken me till this meeting was over to copy and paste the links. So, or I would have lost you. So thank you, Shandy. I really appreciate it. Oh, great. Are there any questions for me? You know, I love ideas. So again, you had a great idea for delivery or something we can do a little bit differently or something better or something, you know, needs to be talked about. Shoot me an email. Reach out to your hub managers. We thrive on things like that. Yeah, we're one of those odd departments that do like, well, I'm speaking for everybody, but I feel like we like the change as long as we keep touching back, making sure it affects positively you guys. So thank you. That's my commercial.
Thank you, Susan. I'm very excited about dogs. I think that makes so much sense. You know, and it gets the item into the hands of the patron so much quicker. And that's what it's all about. That's what we all try to do. Keep them happy, right? Okay, well, thank you, Susan. I'm not seeing anything else up here. I'm going to turn it over to Shandy for an update on communications and I guess marketing, I guess. Yes, but anyway, I'm turning it over to Shandy and thank you.
Hey there. So I don't really have anything going on that I don't think the other departments are going to cover today. So a lot of my job is, you know, helping make their programs successful and making sure that you guys know about what they're doing. So I know Cassie talked about what Share is doing. I'm sure that Anna or Ellen will be talking about the CE programs coming up. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And I will turn it over to Ellen for updates on membership and administration. Ellen, would you
Hi,
like
everyone.
to say anything?
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you and to hear you all. This has been a really nice morning. I think Christine did a great commercial for our upcoming Members Matter in March, the part 2 of what she's offering here. And stay tuned to our third Thursday sessions. We've really enjoyed doing them this year. We do need to remind you all, and I know most of you all know it, and many of you have taken care of it already, that we're in the season of certification. So we'll be reminding all libraries that the Interlibrary Loan Traffic Survey and your certification has to be taken care of. And you can log into your L2 account if you're a certification contact and get started. And if you have any questions, please contact us. As soon as we move into the new year, the system starts planning, and we start planning for our operational plan for FY23. So I believe that planning formally will start at our supervisors meeting next Thursday. And this year we're doing it with a little bit of a twist that I think should intrigue all of you. And that is a group has been formed, and they're informally called the Out of the Box Thinkers, diverse system staff who have brainstormed ways we can bring better, more enhanced services to our membership. And that group has done lots and lots of brainstorming and thinking and talking to each other to develop some kind of priorities we can look for as we move into the next year. To balance that group, we also have a group called the Nuts and Bolts group that is looking at what the first group proposes and says, okay, this is great. Let's see how much it'll cost us. Let's see how much time it'll take. Let's see how much staff it'll take. And those two groups working together, we're really hoping will provide an operational plan moving forward into the next fiscal year that can help the system grow and develop. And speaking of growth and development, we have somebody in on this call today that has started working for the library system on Tuesday of this week. And that is Leah Gregory. Leah comes to us from the Mascouda School District, and she will be serving as our membership coordinator for our school libraries. This is a position we've been wanting to fill for a very long time. We're really excited to be able to branch out and to provide more focused attention to our school library members. So Leah, do you want to unmute and share your video and just say hi to everybody who's here?
There she is.
Leah, we're not hearing you.
There we go. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is, I'm very excited to be here. I don't think you guys heard me say that. And as you can tell, I'm trying to learn everything this week. So I don't know how successful I'm being, but giving it a try. So I hope that I will be helpful to many of our members, and I will be seeing and talking to a lot of you soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Leah. So that's all I have to report. Please tend to your certification. We're working on the operational plan, and Anna, you can bring us home if I've forgotten anything.
Okay, thank you. And I'm so excited that Leah's here. I haven't had a chance to actually meet her in person, but I know that our schools really need that kind of support and outreach, and someone who really understands what it's like to walk the talk. So we're very happy to have her. And I understand she's also a very nice person with a great customer service focus. So, and she seems very approachable. So I'm sure that you are all welcome to say hi and to reach out to her. And I will end it where it's already almost 12 o'clock. I don't want to keep anyone any longer than necessary. I thank you all for joining us. And I hope to see you next month. And I will have the topic that it's going to be on very soon for you. Okay, thank you. Goodbye.